Tom Anderson, Insider Gaming. Analysis. Ubisoft faces its most challenging year in its history. I think this is undoubtedly true. Challenging being perhaps even a generous word, because for them, this is a full-on make or break year. The release of Shadows, I think, is going to be the most consequential release probably of the entire year for any studio, because it will basically make or break the next few years for Ubisoft. Because, and I'm sure he's going to talk about this as we go through the article, but basically the understanding is if Ubisoft sees success with Shadows, if Shadows pops off, does really well financially, not just in terms of like engagement and sentiment, but if it sells well and makes a lot of money, then they keep themselves afloat for a while because they'll have some cash flow, they'll have some positive sentiment, they can go into negotiations with Tencent with a little bit more confidence, a little more chutzpah maybe. But if it does not pop off, if it's not just like a smash hit that blows up, makes tons of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, then they're in trouble. Then there's nothing really keeping them afloat at that point beyond the reliance on Tencent to kind of cash flow them forward. So as far as I can tell, if Shadows does well, Ubisoft has a year or two to figure out their stuff. Hopefully they can get out, hopefully for their sake, they can get out some other stuff like Far Cry 7 or Black Flag Remake and some other stuff that finds success and makes some money. And then they can maybe start to patch themselves up. If Shadows fails, I don't think they have that time. I think then within like 6 months, you'll hear news of some deal between Tencent and the Guillemot brothers, massive restructurings, project cancellations, layoffs, stuff like that. Because I don't think there's any other option at this point. They're in serious trouble and they're running out of money, which is the other piece. 2024 was nothing short of a disaster. Whoops, I did not mean to press that. Damn it. Hold on. This is what I get for right-clicking on stuff. 2024 was nothing short of a disaster year for Ubisoft. In fact, it's safe to say that it's had a rough few years. Ubisoft stock has fallen from its February 2021 high of 84 euros, 60. What is it in Europe? It's not P, that's Britain. I don't know. 84 euros roughly to a mere 12.53 at the time of writing. That's a massive 85% reduction in stock price from its all-time high. Is it just cents? Really? Euro cents? Cents? Oh, well, who knew? So to put that into perspective, if you invested $1,000 into Ubisoft during its peak, you'd now only be left with $150, which is what's known in the industry as a bad investment. Icky, maybe. Now, granted, you can do this with like literally any company if you take their peak performance and then look at it later and be like, ooh, it's lower. Therefore it's bad. For a long time, let me see if I can pull this one up. They actually kind of dug themselves out of a hole. Carvana was going to explode for a while, but then they managed to dig themselves out. But Carvana back in like August of 2021, $361 a share. Just back in 2023, they were trading down at $474. That's a much worse drop than what Ubisoft has seen. So Carvana went from these heights to rock bottom, like literally scraping the bottom of the barrel that holds all the other barrels whose bottoms you were scraping. And then look, they dug themselves out of it. They actually managed to dig themselves out of it. And now they're actually doing quite well. So I think it's never impossible. You can certainly make a comeback. You can dig yourself out of this, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of dedication, and you have to identify the key problems and deal with it. For Carvana, there were a lot of major problems with their company as it was exploding in the post-COVID era with really low interest rates, people buying tons of cars because the rates were so low. And then the second the rates went up, people stopped borrowing, people stopped doing that, and all of a sudden their stock price starts to implode because they're like, investors like, hey, well, then it doesn't make any sense anymore. And then they figured it out and they started building themselves back up and they did it. So it's not impossible that Ubisoft could do the same thing, to be very, very clear. But they have to identify the key problems and then they have to deal with them. And I think we all know the key problems, but we'll see. So far, its current fiscal year has not been great either, and has seen poor financial results attributed to games missing internal expectations, increased development costs, game cancellations and delays, the years of mismanagement, overspending, and generally just being out of touch with the gaming sphere, have led Ubisoft to a crossroads. Ultimately, it'll be the developers that suffer the consequences, and with Ubisoft's future seemingly hanging in the balance of just one AAA game, that being AC Shadows, we might not have to wait long to see how things shake out. I cannot fathom the pressure they are under. I cannot fathom the pressure they're under. Imagine you're one of the like 400 to 500 people that are the main devs on this game. And you know, if this does not pop off, if this is not like the biggest game you've ever had, your company's ever had, you and many other members of the 20,000 employees are going to lose their jobs, and the whole thing's going to be restructured and everything's going to fall apart. Like, I can only imagine the pressure. I can only imagine the pressure. Now, to Ubisoft's credit, the bit that they get, they have delayed the game. They've given devs more time. I don't think they had an option based on some of the stuff that they said around the time that the delay hit. Like Marc-Alexis Cotier went and spoke at a conference kind of thing, a panel sort of interview in the wake of the delay. And he brought up other games that they delayed. He brought up like AC Unity, which could be reading into it. It sounded to me like he was comparing Shadows to Unity, and that's why they needed to delay it. And I'm like, if it was that bad, if it was that broken and you were gonna launch it, I'm not sure how much 3 months will do or 4 months will do. But they've delayed it a good amount, and then they just delayed it again into March, where now it will basically have the entire month to itself. So it's gonna really have the best possible chance to do well. It's not competing with Monster Hunter at this point. It's not competing with Kingdom Come. It just gets its own month. So they now have more time, and they have even more space. But I mean, they have to nail it. There's no other way to describe it. They have to nail it. Buyout talks. It's been widely reported that Ubisoft is currently in talks with advisors about ways to stabilize the business, with most recent reports suggesting that Tencent was set to buy out the company and take it private. Those talks seem to have stopped as a significant term in negotiations revolved around the Guillemot brothers' insistence on retaining control, which is likely a term that Tencent probably wouldn't want to agree to. After all, the Guillemot brothers essentially put Ubisoft in this predicament in the first place, which absolutely is true. My stance has been for years that as long as the Guillemot family is in charge, I don't see the company magically changing. We've been down this road before. You guys remember Ghost Recon Breakpoint? Remember that? That was what, 2018, 2019, something like that. It was such a disastrous launch. Do you know what they did? They delayed their entire lineup. They delayed half dozen games by months and months to restructure, to earn back consumer confidence. Like, this has happened before. They don't learn. They just wait until they think you forgot and then try to do it again, rushing out stuff that isn't ready, that's kind of buggy, that needed more time, that needed more resources put behind it. And then when they get caught with their pants down, then they delay stuff and act like they are we're really sorry. And they're not. They've done this so many times before. It's not the devs' fault that they're being forced to push these games out so quick. The devs were begging, according to the reports, the devs were begging to get a delay for Shadows, for Outlaws, for all of these games that they've put out in recent years that were a little rushed or even a lot rushed. And it's only with Shadows that they finally listened after the failed performance of Star Wars Outlaws. So I just want to be clear, like, they get credit for delaying it because delaying it is a good move and was the right choice. But let's not get it twisted. Like, they've never learned, and they've done this many times before. So it's not like they're going to magically learn this time. So Tencent demanding to take control of it and get new management, I think is very reasonable for them. They're like, hey, if we're going to spend $1 billion buying you out, we want new management. Guillemot family says no, so that's that. I would like to think the Guillemot family would relinquish control to save tens of thousands of employees from mass layoffs once the company is totally going belly up. But I mean, at this point, I think that they might not care. I don't know. But I hope they're coming up with some solution that can protect those employees, because the employees are just doing the best work they possibly can. The employees are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. All of this is like executive problems. This is all with the management. For now, the negotiation halt seems to be a strategy both sides are playing. Tencent will continue to snap up shares and raise its stake. At the same time, the Guillemot brothers will want to wait until late February to early March to reignite negotiations, as Ubisoft is set to release the highly anticipated AC Shadows on February 14th. That has now been moved to March 20th, so it is now no longer February 14th. In Assassin's Creed Shadows' failure gives Tencent more opportunities to increase its stake at a lower share value. Conversely, a successful launch gives the Guillemot brothers more negotiation power to head into further talks. The problem with this, they have a deal right now where they can't increase their stake above 10%. So Tencent can't actually do that. I'm sure there are also stipulations that they can't go and find a secondary partner or a shell company to buy anything up either. Because that's something other corporations will do if they're trying to buy them out. They'll go and they'll like, hey, Tencent and Embracer Group are partnering on this acquisition. And it's how they get around these like problems. But I think that, I personally think that there's probably limitations to what they can do. And they probably thought of that. Because billions of dollars are on the line, and when billions are on the line, people tend to pay attention to details. They continue, it seems that at least by my own sources, the move could favor the Guillemot brothers more. By all accounts from various Ubisoft sources, pre-orders for the game were high before the game's delay and are still looking strong, but expectedly still behind that of Valhalla, which was released on both past and current generation consoles at the time. AC Shadows seems to be Ubisoft's last major lifeline, and even if the game is a tremendous success, it doesn't necessarily mean that Ubisoft is out of the woods. This is the key thing to understand, okay? And I know some people are gonna get hung up on this. This has been reported by like 3 different outlets that we've read articles on stream about, that we've talked about. You may not like it, but according to people behind the scenes, who are also talking about how dysfunctional the company is and how everything's going poorly, those same people bad-mouthing the company are also saying, yeah, but the pre-orders are pretty strong. You don't have to like it. I think it's crazy people are pre-ordering games like in general, but the pre-orders are apparently strong. Okay, so like take it or leave it. That is, it is what it is. It's not like they're trying to hype it up. These are the sources that are also bad-mouthing the company and are trashing the company for various reasons. And they're still saying that the pre-orders are strong. So, whether that's strong enough to be a smash hit is a separate question. But apparently they consider the numbers strong. But this is the difference, okay? There's a few different standards, okay? There's like on the scale of success. There is flop territory, okay? There is, let's say, below expectations, we'll say meets expectations, okay, and then exceeds expectations, okay? There's a few different ways, and we'll say, this is the break-even point. So this right here is how much money they spent. This is how much money they spent on the game. They have to get there to break even. A game can come in here. We'll say that this is below expectations, but it still breaks even. We'll just say that that's where this is, break even and below expectations, because they want to make money. They don't want to just break even. If something lands in this range, it's just a flop because it's losing money. So we'll say it's a flop. But if something can break even, make a little bit of money, it still might not meet expectations. It still might be considered below expectations. It still might be, disappointing because it didn't make that much money, but it still could be good. If it comes in and lands like right here, hey, it met expectations. We made a good amount of money on it. We're feeling good. And then if it does even better and it pops off up here, then, we're really, really excited because we're just making tons of money. All of this is just pure profit and we're happy. But this is where I think some people get mixed up. There's lots of games that we've seen where they land in this like bubble where maybe it performed below expectations, not quite meeting expectations, but it's still not considered a flop. It can still be above above your absolute minimum or maybe below your expectations, but it still doesn't mean it's a flop, because flop typically is defined as like it lost tons of money. It was a total disaster. Like did Dragon Age Veilguard, is that considered a flop? I honestly, I don't think so, because I don't think they expected it to perform up here. I think this whole bar was shifted down. I think they were not expecting it to pop off that much. But with Shadows, all of this is kind of skewed because Shadows can't just break even. Shadows has to like pop off up here. Even if it goes in a regular year, it would have just needed to hit here. This still is not good enough to save the company. They need it to pop off. And that's going to be the tricky bit, is they're comparing it to Valhalla. Valhalla launched in COVID. Valhalla launched at a time where there was not a lot else to play. The marketing cycle for Valhalla had extreme hype behind it. There was, as far as I can remember, I don't think there was any real drama behind it. I remember some people being pissy about the female protagonist shown in some of the trailers. But I remember also this trailer, 9.4 million views, 324,000 likes. I mean, it might be hard to believe, people were hyped for this, for a Ubisoft game. Just 4 years ago, people were losing their minds, were super, super excited for it. Super excited for it. And made them a ton of money, made them $1 billion. They took in $1 billion in revenue from this. You know, it printed money for them. So this is also the other thing to remember with this. I'm just going to mention it. Different time period. 4 years ago, a different world. Was kind of a different world. Every 5 years or so, the pendulum in the gaming industry swings. Some years it is on, it's on EA, because EA does something really stupid. The next year it swings and PlayStation does something stupid, launches Concord 2, whatever. And then it'll swing back, and then CDPR launches Cyberpunk and it's a total disaster. And so they decide, that company now is the whipping post of the industry. Just swings. Right now, it has swung pretty much as far towards Ubisoft as it possibly can. Okay. It's hard to imagine people being even less trusting of a Ubisoft marketing promise or something, right? But this has always happened. Back in 2017, 18, 19, it was EA with the loot boxes that they were pumping out. It was Take-Two. It was Warner Brothers with the loot boxes in Shadow of War. Of course, you remember Battlefront 2. That debacle was so terrible, Disney had to step in and yell at EA for how over monetized they did that, because they thought it was doing permanent brand damage to the Star Wars brand. There was so many problems in that game, or in that era, for those companies. And at that time, Ubisoft was doing pretty solid. They had Origins, they had Odyssey and Valhalla coming, and they were doing pretty well. It's been the last 4 to 5 years that they have just steadily been screwing up consistently. And that's why it's a managerial issue. And that's why I think as long as this management team is in place, we can't have a lot of confidence in them righting the ship. But I do want to just say, in 2 years, I don't think Ubisoft will be the target of all of this anymore. I think there will be another company. You already see some of these people trying to shift and get raging at CDPR for Witcher 4, for the gall of having Series B protagonist. You're seeing some of those people freak out at PlayStation for Ghost of Yotei, or at Rockstar for GTA 6 for Lucia, is that her name? Whatever that protagonist is. So you're seeing some of this just swing. There's always going to be rage and energy maybe in the industry towards certain companies. Right now, all of it is focused on Ubisoft, but I guarantee you, probably even by the end of 2025, it's going to be focused on a different company, because that's just how this works. It swings. The pendulum swings. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, it all lies on Shadows. It really, really depends on how this goes. Mismanagement hell. Ubisoft and mismanagement go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Over the last few years, I've reported on countless projects that have faced mismanagement issues, and it seems it'll never change at face value. For the most part, it comes down to upper management's personal friendships and family, with one looking out for another at the expense of thousands of frustrated developers. This 1 billion%. Ubisoft, at its core, is a family company. It is a family-run company. It's like that tow truck company in your local town. It's run by a handful of brothers and their dad, And even though Uncle Tom has 15 DUIs, they still let him drive the towing truck because they don't want to deal with the drama if they kick him out of the company, because they're all in the same family and they got to put up with it. And then, you know, yeah, the Vin Diesel family. And then you got, you know, Grandpa is also blind and senile, and he keeps towing cars into the reservoir, and because he thinks that that's where you drop them off to be fixed by the magical car elves. And even though you need to force him to retire, he refuses because he thinks he still has got it. And because it's a family business, they can't just make the clear decisions that need to be made. They can't just fire him for having the DUIs. They can't just force him out because he's senile. They can't do the things they need to do because it's family. And that causes problems. That can cause a lot of issues because it prevents you, having a family business prevents you from sometimes making those difficult decisions, because it can, for many family businesses, tear the family apart because people will be willing to destroy their personal relationships over that. I can admire that, desiring to keep the family tight. I can appreciate that. But at the same time, if you have 20,000 employees, at some point you got to think about them. And for Ubisoft, like they, as this sentence I think very accurately puts it, for the most part, it comes down to upper management's personal friendships and family, with one looking out for another at the expense of thousands of frustrated developers. Something I've heard it from people who work at Ubisoft. I've heard it from people who have previously worked at Ubisoft. Everybody there is very frustrated with the executive team, but they can't say anything while they're there because, again, it's family. And Eve right now, even though there is a lifeline ready for Ubisoft in the form of Tencent to buy them out, take it private, restructure, deal with that stuff, they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because they'd have to let go of control. Yeah, it's called nepotism, and it's not that cool. I agree, B7. I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, it is literally nepotism. But that's also why it's not as simple as just getting rid of Yves Guillemot. Because when you have this is not specific to any one company. This is just something I Googled, corporate chart, org chart, same thing. As you can see here, let's just say this is Yves Guillemot. Okay. I don't know what company this is for, but let's just say this is Yves Guillemot at the top. If you fire him, and we'll say that each of these people with a green dot are Ubisoft, like Guillemot family friends or family members, like cousins, nephews, uncles, brothers, sisters, that type of thing. Of these people, you get rid of Eve, you still have the problem with all these people kind of looking out for each other, helping each other. If they screw up, one person kind of shoves the report of their misconduct under the table. If they should have been fired, they don't get fired because this person looked out for them and covered for them. All of these problems persist. So you kind of have to then go and steadily clear out all of it, which is why it would be just a gutting. I mean, this is why it would be such a dirty, messy reorganization if Tencent took them over, because they'd have to do this. I mean, Tencent, they know what they're doing. They're the most profitable game company in the world. They take in like tens upon tens of billions of dollars every year. They know what they're doing, and they are not so stupid as to leave those people in their positions. So they could cut out maybe Eve as the leader and then be like, hey, there's a new boss in town. The standard is none of this flies. If we find out you're looking out for somebody that you have a relation to, you're done. And over time, people will retire. They'll move to other companies. They'll move on because now the cash cow isn't there. Now it's no longer the family business that they can kind of mess around in. It's not as fun, and eventually they'll leave or they'll get booted out because they screw up. And eventually it'll sort itself out. But that's just the problem, is that for Ubisoft, it's not as simple as just get rid of the one guy. It's a much bigger problem than all of that. Continuing on, the most public projects that have struggled are the likes of Ubisoft's self-proclaimed quadruple A title, Skull and Bones and Beyond Good and Evil 2, with the latter still not having a public release date despite being announced 16 years ago. But beyond the more prominent titles, the mismanagement at the company has led to countless projects being canceled or in a confusing stage of development without any end in sight. One notable game, codenamed Project U, recently returned to the drawing board after 5 years of development and saw its budget balloon in size. One developer who worked on the project said they wouldn't be surprised if it already exploded past the $100 million mark. How on earth do you spend $100 million on something that almost without a doubt is going to flop? Like, what are we doing? X-Defiant, one of the most promising free-to-play shooters at Ubisoft, and to be honest, in the entire industry over the last decade, released half-baked thanks to the same fate of the mismanagement and higher-ups only looking out for themselves. After the game's initially impressive numbers, developers told me that the writing was on the wall for months and that they would eventually close due to the massive drop-off and lack of player spending. The game was losing several $1 million in development costs alone, and that's without the initial development costs, servers, and on top of that, and more on top, a cost that Ubisoft could... My goodness, I'm tired. A cost that Ubisoft couldn't afford in its current state, nor see a future where it could become profitable, a profitable title due to its own doing. In the end, Ubisoft's mismanagement presents a serious challenge for the company moving forward, despite Ubisoft's board launching an investigation into the company's struggles, of which 5 members are from the Guillemot family, by the way. They're investigating themselves to see if they think they have done anything wrong. Like, we can't figure out what's wrong. I mean, we've done everything correct. It's crazy, dude. Like, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, do they really think that they're doing this reasonably? No one, at least to those I've talked to, believes it will lead to any change. Speaking with past and current Ubisoft employees at various levels of the company, it's widely speculated that CEO Yves Guillemot would rather go down with the Skull and Bones ship rather than give up his position, with a similar sentiment reflected about the other Guillemot brothers. It's a hurdle the company will somehow need to overcome wherever Assassin's Creed Shadows lands, even if it's a success. Ubisoft's latest annual internal survey, which allows employees to somewhat anonymously, I say this because departments and studios are not anonymous, give feedback to the company. And that survey showed that employee trust in the company is staggeringly low. While I do not have an exact number for the entire company, some studios had an overall company trust level as low as 15 to 20%, purposely being vague here because he doesn't want to say like of 16%, because then Ubisoft could look at it and be like, oh, that was this company, somebody at this studio is talking to this guy. Okay. And this is, again, it's just another piece to remember. The people that are working at Ubisoft are making the best games they can. Those people that are at the studios that are working on the games, only 15 to 20% of those people think that the company is in the right track and the company leadership knows what they're doing and they trust in the leadership and all that. I find it hard to imagine that. Like, that's crazy. That's like Congress levels of approval. I mean, that's crazy. But no wonder people are gonna, you're gonna have difficulties honing in on talent and preserving that talent when you have such little confidence from those employees. They've got games coming. They've got Far Cry. They've got Splinter Cell Remake. Shadows, Hexe, Black Flag Remake, Rayman, Division 3 is like 3 to 5 years away probably. Sands of Time is coming at some point. Ghost Recon. I mean, they've got projects coming, but the thing is, all of these projects take a lot of money. They take a lot of time, and that is like, those are the two things that Ubisoft probably does not have a lot of, because they are in a spot where if they're not careful, like they could get in some trouble. And they've got some cash on hand. I mean, they've got this kind of last minute thing they posted in January 9th. Net bookings are now expected around 300 million, primarily reflecting lower than expected holiday sales, mainly for Star Wars Outlaws, as well as the discontinuation of X-Defiant. They still expect approximately break-even non-IFRS operating income and free cash flow for fiscal year 24 to 25. Net bookings are now expected to come in around 1.9 billion euros and include new partnership opportunities for Ubisoft's games and franchises, as well as for the monetization of streaming rights acquired last fiscal year. Yves Guillemot, the CEO, he says, "We made good progress on the strategic and execution reviews initiated a few months ago and are confident that this will position Ubisoft for a stronger future. We have taken decisive steps to reshape the group in order to deliver best-in-class player experiences, enhance operational efficiency, and maximize value creation. We also recently appointed leading advisors, Again, I think this is the same team where 5 of them are family members, and are actively exploring various strategic and capitalistic options to unlock the full value potential of our assets. We are convinced that there are several potential paths to generate value from Ubisoft's assets and franchises. Additionally, we are all behind our team's efforts to create the most ambitious Assassin's Creed opus of the franchise, and made the decision to provide an extra month of development to Shadows in order to better incorporate player feedback gathered over the past 3 months that will enable us to fully deliver on the potential of the game and finish the year on a strong note. They're expecting to break even on non-IFRS operating income. This right here, standard and mandatory reporting, software, not defined, IFRS, where's just, revenue, non-IFRS. In accordance with IFRS, contracts obtained in acquisition are accounted at fair value as of the acquisition date. In subsequent periods, the respective revenue will not be shown in full and does not correspond to the revenues the acquired company would have reported if it had been taken over by Software AG. Accordingly, IFRS revenues. Okay. So this is specifically for that company, but for this, it's all based on the reporting standards. And the reason why this is important when you read little bitty things like this is because there's different ways of accounting for revenue, right? Like if we sign a deal and let's just say this is the timeline. Okay. This is today and this is 2026. Okay. And we'll say that this is like just the year broken up, right? If I sign a deal today and it's for $100 million, I'm going to get paid as I deliver things over the next 3 months. Okay. Some accounting standards, and I can't tell, I think that's what they're using here, will allow you to account for that full $100 million at this point, even though it's requiring you to complete the work over here. It just won't be accounted for over here. So you can get the cash represented earlier, which can make your financial position look a little better, which is nice if you're trying to look like you're breaking even in a terrible year. But it also means the next year is not going to actually be that good because you already accounted for the revenue beforehand. And that's why when we see this, like they expect to break even in non-IFRS operating profit and free cash flow for fiscal year 2024 to 25. Their now expected net bookings are 1.9 billion euros. Like cool, but there's a lot of messy stuff with the finances we'll see in the final quarterly reports and annual reports that go up at the end of their fiscal year at the end of March. But until then, we're just kind of guessing on what their overall bookings are like. They still take in a lot of money. I mean, to be clear, they're taking in $300 million or 300 million euros in 1 quarter. Their net bookings are expected for the year to be around 1.9 billion. I mean, they still take in a lot of money, but for 20,000 employees and some extremely expensive studio space and retail space, like they just can't do that. Not retail space, studio space. So without a doubt, Ubisoft is in a bad spot. They need this to pop off. They need this to be not just a well-received game. They need this to be like the most well-received game in terms of revenue, in terms of money generated. They need that. And I've been thinking about it, like what are the odds that they can actually pull this off? And I think that there's a couple factors to it, but really at the end of the day, the only way that this works is if the game is really good. That's the only way you can see it. The people that were saying that Indiana Jones was going to flop because there were women in the game, they were like part of the same crowd, like the anti-DEI, anti-woke kind of YouTuber sphere, maybe is the word. They were bashing Indiana Jones, and then the game comes out and it ends up being really, really good. And then those people shut up real quick and move on to the next game to bash. And I think if Shadows ends up being really, 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 really good, something similar could happen too, and that could help. But beyond that, I don't see how any of this could work. They've got to have some big smash success in terms of the quality. And even then, though, I don't know if people will be buying it day one. A lot of people, I think, will just wait for a sale. I do agree Shadows is in a deeper hole. There's been much more drama around it than surrounding like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones did not have anywhere near the hole to dig themselves out of, but I do think if Shadows is really, really, really good and people play it and are like, actually, dude, this is fire, and the clips start going viral on TikTok, if it still exists at that point, and all of that, then I think you could see it finding some success. But it's going to take something like that. It's going to take a lot of it's going to take that sort of grassroots success. If the game is okay, I don't think there's no chance. Do you personally think Shadows will actually be good though? So I've not played it. I have not seen any more than you guys in terms of like gameplay and stuff like that. So I'm just going off of what we've seen that's been made public. Okay. So I want to be clear about that. I'm not speaking with like some secret knowledge. As of today, I have not seen anything. You have not. My feeling is, after seeing the gameplay clips and stuff that they've revealed, I do think the game will be better than a lot of people are expecting. I just from what I've seen, I think it will be. And there's a few reasons for that. See if I can pull up like from Jor, like some of this new stealth and parkour gameplay. I really think the game is going to be like visually stunning. I think it's going to be gorgeous. Just seeing some of the improvements they've made in the last couple months, I think it's going to be ridiculously beautiful. I think it's going to be massive as well. And I think that's going to do a lot for it. It's going to have things like the PS5 Pro enhancements. So PlayStation's going to be marketing it a lot, which is going to help. I think in terms of how it's put together, it will be more impressive than people are giving it credit for. And I'm saying that as somebody that thought the initial gameplay reveal wasn't that crazy impressive. I was just kind of like, but they've made such big improvements since the delays that I'm starting to get much more convinced that this could be very well executed. As for whether the story is interesting or Yasuke or any of that works out, who knows? We can't really tell from these clips and stuff, but the things they've described about the lighting systems, about the weather systems, parkour systems, all of that seems to be significantly overhauled. And you guys are right. These are just small, short clips of gameplay. That's all they've revealed so far. And I think it's because they are waiting to show the full like gameplay for when they do press previews and stuff like that. I think they're going to like let people play it and play 45 minutes of it or an hour of it or something, and then talk about it at length. I think that's the key. But like, see, this gameplay didn't really wow me. This looked much more like Valhalla than anything else I had seen. But what they're showing nowadays is way better. Like even just this footage, which this is the I think George said he took this from X. So this is the compressed footage. But even just this, the animation stuff, the post-processing, the weather effects, way better than it was even over the summer. So I think that it's going to be more impressive than people are expecting. Whether that's enough is a separate question though. Edwin, thank you for the 5. For me, the problem with AC Shadows is the problem with Ubisoft games. Even if it looks amazing, it's going to be even better 50% off 6 months later. Yeah, well, I spoke to somebody who works at Ubisoft and I said exactly that. I was like, the problem for Ubisoft at the end of the day is that people will wait like 6 months, sometimes 3 months. Sometimes 3 months, and they're just gonna wait and get it at a 50% off discount, 60% off discount, and be a happy camper. That's what they're gonna do. And I mean, at that point, can you blame them? The only reason they would buy it day one is if the game is so exciting and looks so cool that they want to do that. And the other piece is the people will buy games day one if they want to support the developer, if they want to vote with their wallet. There's a lot of people that probably could manage to wait 6 months to play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 and get it on sale, because most games go on sale after 6 months. But they want to buy it day one at full price to support the studio because they're rooting for them. They want them to be successful. Ubisoft, the problem is their executive staff is so loathed by the industry that a lot of the industry doesn't want them to be successful. They don't want to give them money. They don't want Yves Guillemot to get a bigger bonus. They don't want that. So they'll actively avoid it. Like there's just no reason for them to take that extra effort and do that, you know? Just wait. He took my thing. Red flag.